A guten Erev Shabbos. How does a believing person deal with seemingly insurmountable problems? This is a challenge that we are all facing at the moment. There is so much suffering, there is so much pain, and there are so many questions. How are we supposed to deal with it? Obviously, introspection on a personal level is always beneficial. But what I would like to deal with is how does one psychologically, spiritually deal with the challenges? Now, in the first instance, I think it is extremely important for us to recognize and to repeat to ourselves that what the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah, that Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu Bo Bitrunya Im Briyosov. Now, Chabad.org has a beautiful translation of that Gemara. They say, God does not make tyrannical and unreasonable demands of his creatures. In other words, Hashem will never allow challenges to take place that we, on an individual basis or on a collective basis, do not have the ability to stand up to and to be successful and to overcome them. We need to accept the fact that challenges is indeed a purpose of our existence. And there is a very interesting maimer of the Tzemach Tzedek in Derech Mitzvah, where the Tzemach Tzedek says that the Tachlis Yeridas HaNeshama hu bishvil HaNisyonos. The ultimate purpose of the neshama coming down to this world, the soul coming down, clothing itself in a body for the purpose of experiencing life, is to be tested. Now, what does that mean, to be tested? How can we understand that? How can we understand the purpose of testing? So, I always like to give the example of physical exercise. We know that for a person to remain healthy and fit, a person needs to do exercise. And when you do exercise, as we know the well-known expression, no pain, no gain. For the exercise to truly assist in the person's physical health, the person's body needs to be challenged. And if you are fortunate enough to have a personal trainer, then that trainer is aware of your body's strengths and weaknesses. He is aware of which parts of your body need to be exercised and which parts of your body do not need, or exercise could actually cause them harm. That is on a physical level. On a spiritual level, Hashem is our personal trainer. This indeed is what the Gemara means when it says that Hashem will not make an unreasonable challenge to his creatures. He is our personal spiritual trainer, and he therefore knows exactly what it is that we need for our soul to be refined, for our existence to be more and more meaningful, and for us to achieve the purpose for which we came down to this world. Now, when we speak about challenges, the challenges are not only challenges of health, challenges of parnosa, the challenges that a person may continually be confronted with. But one of the major challenges that we have, and one of the major challenges for which we are destined to contend with, are challenges in thought. That our belief system is strong enough to be able to cope with questions which seem to have no answer, and nonetheless to maintain our faith in the Almighty, maintaining our faith in Hashem, that everything is part of a plan, that even though we may not see the benefit or the goodness of that plan at the moment, but that it is ultimately for our individual benefit, our collective benefit, our national benefit, and for the benefit for the whole world. Because Hashem doesn't play around with his creation. He only wants there to be good. But many times we are only able to achieve the goodness as a result of being challenged. And when we speak about the challenges of the mind, sometimes the challenges of the mind may be greater than any other challenges. And I mentioned before the Maimer of the Tzemach Tzedek, in which he speaks about the purpose of a neshama is to have nisyonis, tests, challenges. And he speaks at length about the benefit, the different spiritual benefit that arises to the neshama as a result of specific challenges. But he speaks about the challenges of the mind. And particularly, he mentions a very, very interesting observation that was made by the tzaddik Reb Mendel Horodoker. We know that the Akedas Yitzchok, where Avraham brought his son up, he was prepared to bring his son up as a sacrifice. He actually put him on the altar, and it was only in the last moment that he was told by God that God did not desire this human sacrifice. All that he wanted was for Avraham to withstand the challenge and actually to bring Yitzchak up as a sacrifice. But once he actually did it, there was no necessity any further to take this any further. Now, this Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of Yitzchak, is something that we mention on a daily basis, and we ask that Hashem should remember the sacrifice that Avraham made, and in the merit of Avraham's sacrifice, he should bless us with everything good, with everything that we need. And the question is, why is it that this is called the challenge and the test of Avraham? Yitzchak was 37 years of age, and taking a young man of 37 and telling him that you need to be sacrificed, and for the young man not to demur, for the young man to accept totally, is in itself an amazing achievement, an amazing feat. The test was for Yitzchak. Why do we call this one of the tests of Avraham? And indeed, this is the greatest test of Avraham, the 10th of all of his tests. So why do we call it Akedas? Why do we call Akedas Yitzchak V'Elikim Nisas Avraham? That Hashem tested Avraham and not tested Yitzchak. And in addition to that, this question of being prepared to sacrifice yourself because Hashem desires it is something that we find has taken place over the ages, unfortunately, for thousands of years. Jews have given up their lives willingly rather than serve idols, rather than going against the law of God. What was so unique about Avraham Avinu that we use this as an example of an extraordinary act of faith which should stand us in good stead for thousands of years. So the Mendel Horodoker says the test of Avraham wasn't just the action that he should bring up his son as a sacrifice, but the test was the thought process that Avraham for one moment did not question Hashem. And he had major reason to question Hashem, because Hashem promised him that Yitzchak will be through Yitzchak, he will create a great nation. He'll be the father of the Jewish people. And he is the son, Yitzchak, the special, unique son. And at the same time, he tells him that he should bring him up as a sacrifice. Obviously, he could have asked, he could have questioned, how is it possible? It's impossible, I haven't heard right. It's not possible that you've told me to do such a thing. And nonetheless, Avraham's commitment to Hashem was such that whatever negative thought, whatever question he had, he did not permit it to fill his brain. He cast it away totally and completely. And his thought process was 100% committed to Hashem. And that is what we say is the uniqueness of Avraham's test. This was Avraham's test, not Yitzchak's test. Yitzchak's test was preparing himself to give his life over to the will of Hashem, which throughout the ages we find this very, very often. However, Avraham's test was not to question in any way whatsoever. That's the challenge of thought. That is the challenge that we have, that when we see things which seemingly contradict the goodness of God, they contradict the principles that we believe are the basis of creation, one can very easily start asking questions in one's mind. And the test is that we accept the fact that it is all for the good. Hashem will not do anything that is not for the ultimate good. That is our major challenge. Now, I would like to share with you that when we speak about the challenge of the brain, the thought process, the energy that we are able to achieve, the spiritual energy, which I spoke about last week, every single dime that we do a mitzvah, we generate spiritual energy. This is what we call the angels that surround us, are created from our deeds. They are created from our actions. And this spiritual energy remains with us into eternity. Not only, however, do we generate energy, spiritual energy, through our actions and through our speech, and we know that actions generate physical energy. Speech generates physical energy. So we can understand in the same way that it generates physical energy, it will generate spiritual energy. But what about the mind? When we are speaking now about the challenges that apply to one's thought process, where do we find energy generated by the mind? So I'm going to share with you an article that I found on Google from the 25th of February 2017. And I'm only going to be quoting from a few paragraphs because anybody can look on Google and find all the different articles relating to this topic. This is an article from February 25th, 2017, yes. Humans can now control machines with their thoughts. Now, for the non-neuroscientists, how is this awe-inspiring development possible? A scholarly report published this week describes how, in recent clinical trials, 3 participants, 2 with Lou Gehrig's disease, 1 with a spinal cord injury, were able, with the help of a small device implanted in their brain and an external computer console, to type faster using the brain-computer interface than anyone with paralysis has ever managed before. The participants are pointing and clicking by thinking about the movement of their own hand. In a video released by Stanford University, one of many institutions of higher learning involved in the research, the professor of engineering describes the process as eavesdropping in on electrical activity taking place in the brain. The results are visible in videos embedded in the scholarly article. Wheelchair-bound participants with wires affixed to their skull via soapbox-sized metal device use their minds to type answers to questions, to copy phrases, and complete visual video game-like tasks on nearby screens. This isn't science fiction, it's science. Another example, in 2012, a team published a report, Reach and Grasp by People with Tetraplegia using a neurally controlled robotic arm, accompanied by footage of a paralyzed participant named Kathy using her mind to command a robotic arm to reach out, grab a bottle of coffee, and lift it to her mouth so she could take a sip through a straw. Now, this is amazing, but what does this show? That the brain, no less than any other part of a person's body, has the ability to generate physical energy, electrical impulses, and at the same time we can now understand that it also generates spiritual energy. That spiritual energy from the brain is extremely powerful, to such an extent that in the case of our father Abraham, it was so powerful in its achievement spiritually in the higher worlds that this activity was one which is used till this present day in asking Hashem to have mercy on Avram Avinu's children. This is what we are told. At the same time, we are told, our sages tell us in the Gemara in Kedushin, we are told that Machshava Tova HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mitzarfa L'Maisa. A good thought, a positive thought, Hashem will consider like an action. There are a number of interpretations of this particular Gemara. But one thing is clear, that the thought itself, a positive thought, is something that is recognized by Hashem and is treasured by Hashem. So We therefore need to understand very clearly that our thought process in regard to our religious responsibilities is no less than the responsibilities that we have in regard to actions, in regard to speech, doing the right thing, speaking the right thing, also thinking the right thing. Now, when we think the right thing, the positive thoughts, we are told, and this is another very important principle of Hasidic thought that our Rebbe continually emphasized, tracht gut wird sein gut. When you are challenged with a particular problem, you need to be positive, because, as he explains at length in a sikha, that the positive thoughts that you have themselves generate spiritual energy, which in itself has the ability to change the course of events regarding to yourself. That is something that is really another topic that I may be dealing with in the coming weeks. But this is something which is extremely challenging, and I must say that I believe that at the moment, this challenge is one that a believing individual needs to strengthen, exercise his soul in strengthening the belief in God, in believing that whatever negatives there are, it is for a positive purpose. Now, generally speaking, we believe in this concept, but we don't always see it. I want to share with you, however, an instance where this has actually been seen by the individual. A few years ago, I can find the date. There was an individual, I think his name was Shmuel Cohen, who was sitting at a bus stop in Rishon LeZion. And this was during the day, and he was a mashgiach of kashrus, and he was sitting on the bus stop waiting to take the bus to go to his job. That was a time when there was a great deal of terrorism with knives. And as he was sitting at the bus stop, a terrorist came over to him and stabbed him in the back. The people that were around made a ruckus, and they held the terrorist down until the police came. And this individual, the Shmuel, he was taken to Asaf HaRofeh, to the hospital, and he was in critical condition, and because his spleen was ruptured and he was losing blood, and it was quite serious. So the doctors had to make an emergency operation. When they opened him up, and looking at his spleen and looking at his kishkis, they saw a massive growth, a massive cancerous growth, which they immediately removed. And whilst taking care of him, they were able not only to look after the injuries that he was injured with previously, but they were able to remove this growth. If this growth would have continued, his life would have certainly been in serious jeopardy. So in actual fact, this terrible act of terrorism, for him, he was able to see where ultimately this was for the good. Now, this is a beautiful story, and we believe, as the Gemara says in Brochus, that Rabbi Akiva said, Kol ma da'oved rachmonu l'tav oved. Part of our belief system is to believe that whatever Hashem does is for the good. With that type of thinking, we have the strength to overcome the challenges, and let us hope that as a result of our positive thoughts and our positive belief in Hashem, then we will merit to actually see how whatever has happened is ultimately for the good of mankind, and that ultimately let us hope that the ultimate good, which is the coming of Mashiach, is something we should merit to see with our own eyes very, very soon. Have all a good Shabbos.